Hey everyone, this is Steven with Rabbit Hobbies, and in this quick video I'll be going over 5 important tips to keep in mind when working with resin miniatures. Make sure to scrub your miniatures first. As part of the resin casting process, manufacturers will use a thing called mold release agent, which is a spray that they spray on the mold that provides a barrier between the resin and the mold itself. This makes it easy for them to pull the miniature out of the mold. But before we paint our miniature, we have to get this mold release agent off. For this, I use a cup of warm water with a drop or two of Dawn dish soap and a soft toothbrush. And basically, I use this to scrub all over the miniature to remove this mold release agent. Now, if you end up skipping this step and paint your miniature, you may find that the paint actually chips off of the miniature and ruins all of your hard work. Remove the imperfections. Take the time to remove mold lines and flash from your models. In this example, I have Maximus from the Fallout TV show, and this model actually looks pretty good overall. Not a whole lot of mold lines or imperfections to deal with. Using a pair of clippers, you should cut away any resin gates or excess flash first. Take particular care around very small details, making sure that you're not cutting off any important parts of the miniature. Use flush cut clippers or sanding twigs to sand off or remove any parts where the resin gate connected to the miniature. In this case, I'm using a pair of God Hand flush cut snippers that are used for Gunpla models. But you could also use a hobby knife or a sanding twig for this step. Now, in this particular model, there was quite a bit of flash that had leaked out around the edges of the mold. So go in there with a sharp hobby knife and you can scrape off any of this little flash that's squeezed out between the mold. In some cases, I use a firm bristled toothbrush or other hobby brush for this, but with such small details, I don't want to risk actually damaging and ripping off that buttstock or the grip on this weapon. You can also use the more blunt backside of the knife to scrape off any mold lines. Resin is nasty. Wear a mask. You don't want to be breathing in this stuff. Now, the dust from resin miniatures is something that is really nasty. You do not want to be inhaling that stuff. I recommend using a good quality mask when you're working with resin miniatures. Something like this mask from 3M that I got off of Amazon would be a great choice. When sanding or filing resin miniatures, the little tiny particles can get into your lungs, and breathing in small particulate is bad in general. But if you're using 3D printed resin, it's even more important because that stuff is toxic. If you're someone with a beard like me, it can be kind of annoying wearing one of these masks, but it's much better than getting sick. Plastic glue will not work. Use super glue instead. Plastic glue, like this Tamiya extra thin cement, works by dissolving the two sides of the bond that you're trying to glue together. It will not work for resin miniatures. Instead, you will need to use a cyanoacrylate cement or super glue to bond the two sides of resin together, because they do not react with plastic cement. I prefer to buy a medium thickness super glue off of Amazon, and they come with really awesome, very, very small detail tips that you can use for tiny joints when you only want to dispense a very small amount of glue. Hold the pieces together for just a few moments and you should have a fairly strong bond and you can continue assembly. For very small details like the little tiny peg on Maximus's gun, I like to use a pair of tweezers to hold things in place. A few more quick steps and Maximus is fully assembled. Now, often I like to leave off small details like the head. It can also be helpful when fully assembling the model will make it hard to get to all the tight details on the model. When I assemble in sub-assemblies like this and paint separately, I like to use a pin vise to drill a hole in the head or other small detail that I'm painting separate, and I fill that in with a clipped off bit of paper clip. Now, personally, I use a wow stick, which is a really cool 11-in-1 hand drill that is USB rechargeable, but you can use a manual pin vise. They work just fine, and I used one for many, many years. Also, you could just use a Dremel tool if you have one available. Once the hole is drilled and the paper clip is inserted, I either usually jam that into a wine cork, or you can actually fold the paper clip into kind of a triangle shape and use it as its own handle. Remember to always prime your miniatures. Now, the last step before you can start painting is you need to make sure that your miniature is primed. Primer ensures that the paint actually is able to stick to the miniature, and if it's going to be a gaming miniature, it makes it more difficult for that paint to actually rub off. Now, I prefer using Monuments Hobbies primer that's designed for airbrushing, but you could also use brush-on primer. For many, many years, I also used just Rust-Oleum. There's certain kinds of automotive primers that work better than others. You just don't want to use anything gap-filling. Plus, you could also use the Army Painter or Games Workshop primers, but you tend to spend a premium on those. Just want to make sure that you put a light, even coat all over the miniature to give a nice undercoat and something for the paint to stick to. Most people that I know normally will give the primer an hour or so to dry. Personally, for me, I like to wait 24 hours to make sure I have the best possible cure on that. If I've not gone that far before, I've had some rare occasions where the primer does rub off. But here we go, Maximus is looking pretty good and ready for paint. If you like this video, please give me a like and remember to subscribe for new videos each week. Thanks for watching.